So the Canadian maple syrup providers are hinting that this year is not going to be very good because the weather has been fucked. I mean, normally maple trees start producing sap when there's cycles of cold and warm. So in spring, when you get a cold night and a warm day and cycles of that, the trees start pumping out the sap, which is what you make the maple syrup out of. But the weather has been so bizarre this year. I mean, it was almost tropical a couple of weeks ago, and then a giant Antarctica blast, and then like snow, and now it's like warm again. The maple trees don't even know what the fuck is going on. So the producers are saying, look, this year might be a bit weird. So anyway, this next month, April, will be this is the time for maple syrup. So I'm hoping, and I know I'm going to the Maple Syrup Festival in Athens to buy maple syrup from my favorite dude up there, who no one else seems to buy maple syrup from except me, but I like his. So I'm going to go buy some more if he's still around, and then sit at a communal table in the community hall and eat pancakes and syrup with a whole bunch of other people I've never met before. So that is the Maple Syrup Festival in Athens. Also, there's lots of little displays and stuff going on in the street too, which is kind of interesting. Blacksmithing and God knows what else. So that's what I have to look forward to in April. But if there's no maple syrup, I don't even know if it's going to happen. But I think there will be some maple syrup, so it's not all that bad. This is a show about jewelry, why we wear it, why it matters, how it's made, and what it means. I'm Alex D, and I turn cannabis into gold. I make mind-blowing jewelry in gold, silver, and platinum from cannabis plants here in Canada for stage, screen, for people who want to rock crazy jewelry. I'm the Cannabis Goldsmith. Anyway, today's show is about prototyping. I know you're saying that sounds really serious and sciencey, prototyping or engineering-y. But it's not really. Prototyping is just making mock-ups, just making models of your idea in 3D, 3-dimension, so you can see it in all its glory. Jewelry designers, and in fact designers of any kind, make mock-ups. Artists make mock-ups of their paintings. They draw them out first, and then they produce a painting. But when you're a designer and you make 3D objects, not like flat art or anything, but 3D objects where you can walk around it and look at it from all sides, this is why prototypes are important. So how do jewelers make prototypes? Well, that's what this show is going to be about today. Prototyping. And I'm going to go through some of the stuff, the different materials that I use to prototype with. Everyone is different. And in fact, it's kind of prototyping is fun. Prototyping is fun. It's the skunk works. It's where you get to assemble shit, and then to get a sort of a rough idea of what it will look like, right, in the end when you're finished. So that's why prototyping is important. So this is the episode about prototyping. Prototyping it sounds fancy, but it's just making models of ideas you have in your head or on paper. That's what prototyping is about. Even small children do it. They sit down and start making mud pies or making stuff out of sand or dirt or whatever. I mean, we just love making stuff in 3 dimensions. Humans do it, right? So the trick here is to do it intentionally. To intentionally sit down and make a 3D object from an idea you have in your mind. Now, you've already done it, so it's no big stretch to do it again. That's all I'm saying. Now, as artists and designers, we're all different. We conceptualize our pieces differently. We think about our art differently. Some of us have great 3D rendering ability in our brain where we can think of an idea and then create the image in our mind in 3 dimensions that we can later shape on a potter's wheel or carve in wood or whatever. But I'm not like that, and most people aren't like that, and most artists I don't think aren't. Most artists aren't like that either. They're not like 3D CAD programs in their brain. They have to work shit out, and then during this process of working stuff out and making designs out of an idea, what happens is the idea gets refined, and out it comes in the end as a finished product. Now, some of us artists and designers have the complete object appear in our brain, finished, and then we just recreate that. Now, that's happened to me a couple of times with products where I see it. That's the idea in the shower, right? When you have the idea in the shower, you have the visualization of the ring, what it looks like, where the gemstones should go, and then you go into the workshop and you make it just like that. Okay. It would be great if it was that simple. And sometimes it is, but most often, in my case, it's not. And probably in your case too. A lot of times it's a struggle to make a 3-dimensional object from an idea. And that's where prototyping comes into play. It allows you to 3-dimensionalize the idea for the design you have. Now, this is just for you, or to show, it's just for you, basically, to concretize or to make real this idea. And it doesn't have to be the finished piece, like I say. It can be just this sort of rough shape that you can get an idea about. And a lot of times in the design process, that's where designs fail. Because when it looks good on the notepad when you've drawn it out in 2 dimensions, but when you start trying to build it in a model, a prototype of it in a 3D, in 3 dimensions, so that you can see it in the real world, it might not work. It might work on paper and in your brain, but it might not work in 3D. So thus the importance of prototyping. A lot of design doesn't even get past that stage. And believe me, a lot of my designs don't get past that stage. I am like, if I can't make a basic 3D model of it, not with details and stuff, but just the shape, right? If I can't do that, then it's just not going to happen, right? So you can stop and then move on to something else. So that's the purpose of a prototype too. It's to weed out the dumb ideas and leave you with the ideas that you can refine further into making the piece. So when I'm talking about prototyping today, I'm not talking about the complete vision that like Pablo Picasso would have, where he sees the whole drawing or painting in his mind and he just sits in front of the easel and just puts it out there. No, I'm talking about struggle. I'm talking about having an idea in your brain and having to draw it out because it's driving you mental, and you draw it out on a piece of paper, and then it's not enough. You have to make it into something 3D. So that's prototyping. Now I'm in the midst of something right now. It's a product that I want to make. I have to make this product. I know I have to make it. I know there's a market for it. I know there's a need for this product. I know there will be demand for it, but not a lot, a small focused amount of demand. I think this product will sell. But the problem is no one's ever done it before, as is the case. No one's ever done it before, as is the case with all our products. It's like, okay, no one's made something like this before. How do we do it, right? So that's where I am with that. It's the turntable weight, the turntable ingot product. I can't get anyone to make me a wax master model to use in casting, right? Nobody can do it. So I'm going to have to do it by hand. I think Generally, we don't use CAD, or we don't use any kind of design, computer assisted design, only in like small components, because we're more known about creating everything manually by hand and in the old way, right? Even the prototypes. But sometimes you need for components, you need 3D CAD design things. So nobody's willing to do this for this product because it's too big, and it's if you recall, it's an object that holds vinyl on a turntable platter. It's a turntable weight. But my design is innovative and unique and a bit difficult to cast. So nobody's willing to do it. And it's so heavy, the sheer amount of precious metal going into it is so heavy, I guess the people, it either blows out their casting setup of our master goldsmith. It blows out his casting setup because it's not set up to cast big objects like this, right? He's focused on producing rings and bracelets and smaller objects, not just giant thing, right? So I've approached, I guess, 4 different shops now, and nobody is willing to make a master model that we can cast from. So I was disappointed about that, but then it turns out that no, what this means is that I have to do it by hand. I have to make the prototype by hand. Each one of these has to be made by hand. And in fact, that's what will add to the value of this piece. So it's starting to sort, the design itself is starting to sort out by my inability to get someone else to do it for me. It just means that I'm going to have to do it myself. So what I mean here is I have to produce a model in wax, or the special plastic that we use, that I can give to a casting house that they can cover in plaster, put in a kiln, and burn out. That will leave a hole in the plaster. And that is the one-shot mold for this that the gold will go into. When the plaster is dried, they pour the hot gold into that, and boom. And we'll have the turntable platter weight. Now, as far as I know, there's only 1 or 2 shops in the country that can do a good job of producing a big object like this. And they're reluctant to, because it's a lot of metal. And these are companies that are used to dealing with rings, right? And earrings and stuff. This is unusual for them. So, I'll get them to do it. We'll figure it out. But anyway, my problem is prototyping this. It's like, okay, well, how am I going to prototype this? Nobody's going to design this on a computer for me. And to be honest, I don't want them to. Maybe I was looking for an easy way out to get somebody to design it on a computer, because most of my stuff isn't done like that. So I had to really rethink this project. And most people would have let it go and say, okay, fuck, it's undoable. But it's not, I've seen this object in my brain. I suspect there's a market for it, so I'm going to make it. And so I'm working on the prototype, and I've been working on that for a week now. And what happens is, once I get one prototype model made, then I can make a mold from that, a silicone cold mold from that. And then I will have a model that I can further refine each time I produce one of these objects. So, for example, if I get a nice design of this turntable weight object, and I'm happy with it, then I can create a temporary mold for it in silicone. So all the work I've done, all up to now, I can save it in that mold. So if I make a catastrophic mistake with the design, I destroy it in some way, or I'm not happy with it, I can go back to the silicone mold. I can pour wax into it, or special resins that we use, and it's like an undo level with a computer design program. So I'm making these these temporary silicone cold molds. They're very accurate. This stuff is very expensive. And it's like the stuff dentists use to make teeth, basically, right? It captures everything. It's so accurate. And so I make a series of these molds as I'm developing the prototype. So in case I destroy the prototype model, I can go back and create a plastic one and then bring it back up again to where I was before. So that's the purpose of stopping and making temporary molds along the way, so I don't lose anything. So that's how I prototype. That's my strategy. Think of it as an undo level in Photoshop or Illustrator or whatever, Control Z, and you go back to your temporary silicone mold. You pour some resin in it, let it cure, then you can go back to working on it and drilling it out or sanding it or doing whatever. So what I'm doing with this turntable weight, to give an example, I'm prototyping it in aluminium, and just an element of it in an aluminium tube. But I have to fill the ends, so I'm going to use epoxy putty to fill the ends. So I'm using all kinds of different material to create this object that I'm going to mold in silicone and then make out a wax that will go to the casting house and get melted out, or resin. Now, in the old days of jewelry, I mentioned wax a lot. Wax is how jewelers used to make designs. We'd carve it in wax and then give that to the casting goldsmith, and he would just melt out the wax and fill that hole with gold. Okay. Now these days there are other types of materials we use instead of wax here in our studio here at Tribe. There are resins. There are like multi-part resins that are available, that have been available for a while now. The first one was Alumilite white, which is a really fast curing 2-part polyurethane resin. You can machine it once it's cured. So it's a product that there's a bunch of other companies making similar products now. Smooth On is another company that makes these urethane casting resins that are very they're accurate, and they have different cure times, and they're really, really good for jewelry design. Now, if you are using a 3D CAD design, jewelry design person, if you're going to somebody to have your rings designed, for example, they're outputting either waxes that you can take to your casting house, or some of them are using these special resins. The cheaper jewelry printers use resins, and the better ones use wax, special jeweler's waxes, because they tend to melt out more fully when the casting goldsmith or the casting house puts it in a kiln and melts it out. It comes out cleanly. But a lot of these 2-part resins will do the same thing. They'll fully melt out. They have some of them have comparable melt out qualities to wax. And so that's what I tend to use instead of wax. I don't like carving wax. Jewelers' waxes come in different hardnesses, in different shapes. You can buy it in blocks or in sheets or in round ring shapes that you can carve out. And the waxes have different hardnesses, and you carve them with tools like little carving tools, or you can sometimes use like dental drill type things to Fordham drills, we call them, or pendant drills, jewelers call them, to carve out your ring designs and stuff in the wax. But I don't like it because it's too soft, and I can't apply machines to it like belt sanders or shit like that. You can't deal with wax like that. But if you're using a hard resin that is cured, you can use, for example, a belt sander. If you're working on a huge piece, you can sand a bunch off the bottom or whatever. Like, you'd never be able to do that with wax, and yet it melts out. So that's what I tend to use these days for my prototyping. But even before that stage, like this turntable weight thing, think of it just as a cylinder, right? Just a simple cylinder shape for now. And so far I've got a tube made of aluminum. It's been in the laser. I'm putting hallmarks deeply in the side of it, and I might even put some knurling so you can hold on to this thing. It's like a small cylinder that you pick up with your hands, so I don't want it slipping out of your hand because it's going to weigh a lot. This is very heavy. These will go up to 1 pound in weight, and they're small and heavy. So I don't want the person putting this on their turntable for it to slip out of their finger. So I'm working on deeply embedding our hallmarks in the side so it acts as a kind of knurling that when you grip it with your fingers, it has grip, right? It just doesn't slip out. Because I know DJs or people are at home just, are killing it in their home studio with their 1200s. And maybe they're having a drink or something too, and the fingers are wet, and if you pick up something, it might fall out. So I'm kind of worried about this. So this is where prototyping comes into play too, where you can test the attributes of a product, whether it's actually functional in the sense that you want it to be. And for example, a ring, right? You might have a great idea for a ring, and then when you prototype it in wax or in resin or whatever, and you put it on your finger to try it, it doesn't feel right. It just hurts to wear. And you would never know that unless you made the 3D mock-up, the prototype. So with my cylinder prototype here, I've got like a thick aluminum tube. It's like, 4 or 5 millimeters thick tubing. It's 1.5 inches in diameter. I'm burning chunks out of it with the laser, and then I'm going to glue like epoxy putty to block the top up. It's just play, basically, to come up with something you're happy with. And then once that's done, then you mold that in silicone, and you make a resin model of it, and you take that out of the silicone, and you look at it with a magnifying glass, and you can see the errors that you've made in the casting. You take those out, or you cast it again, or you file them down, or you fix the shape so that it looks the way you want it to look. And then when you're happy, you can make a final silicone mold to add to your library. And this is as far as you got with the design. And anything else, if you make a resin model from that mold, anything else you add to it is gravy. You can add flourishes, you can add extra details, you can take details out, whatever. You can change it just that little bit to make it unique and magnificent for the client. So that's what I'm going to do with these products. Like I've tested them, I've reworked them. In the process of not being able to find someone to make it for me, I've had to redesign the piece in a better way. It's worked out to be a much better design. It'll be much simpler. It's going to look cleaner on the turntable deck, on the face of the deck. And it's going to be great. So just working out these little things in the prototype, the grip on your fingers when you're picking it up and putting it on the platter, that's going to be just right before I make this in silver. Now these are massive too. They're big. So I'm going to have to talk I think there's like one casting place in Canada that can do it. So I'm going to have to sweet talk them into doing it for me, and once this master model is done. Now the resins, what else do I use besides resin for prototyping before I wrap this up? Fimo clay. A lot of jewelers use Fimo clay, or this polymer clay. Now, when you're doing jewelry design, you don't even have to bake it. This is the clay that you can you can design, say, an object in, and you're supposed to put it in the oven and bake it, and it turns into plastic, and then you have your object that you can mold and then make gold objects out of it. But a lot of times I don't bake the clay. I just leave it raw, like wet, right? Not wet, uncured. That's the right word for it, or unbaked. So I work with the clay while it's still soft, and I design whatever I want to design in it. Then I silicone mold that, and the silicone material won't stick to even uncooked Fimo. You might want to use like a release spray or dust it lightly with cornstarch. You pour in the silicone molding material, and then when the silicone is cured, you can just basically scrape out the Fimo, and you've got the impression of what you created in the silicone, now cured silicone, that you can put resins in and make more firm or more solid objects from that. So a lot of times if I'm trying to design, say, a closure or something weird, like a component, and I don't have anything already that I've made before, I'll whip something up quickly in Fimo, mold it in silicone, and then use resin in that mold, and then work with that, because you can tool it, you can sand it. It's harder. It glues to itself with the same resin. So you mix up a small, tiny batch of the same resin, and you can glue it to itself. Now all this stuff melts out in a kiln, which is ideal for jewelry. So there you go. The types of silicone that I use the best ones are very, very expensive. If you don't have a vacuum, you're going to need to buy expensive silicones, and they're very expensive, but they're good. They don't shrink when they cure, and they capture every single detail of your design, and that can make your final products better. Here's the things to look at for prototyping. Use whatever. You can carve out of wood. It doesn't matter. You can carve out of wood. You can use raw Fimo clay. You can use, I guess, mixed media, like I'm doing with this an aluminum tube, some epoxy putty. God knows what else I'll glue onto this, and then mold that and make it an amazing turntable ingot product for DJs, or a bracelet, or whatever it is you're working on. So that's it. Prototyping. Make it real, man. You got it in your brain. Make it real. It doesn't have to be resiny either, or complex like this. Sometimes just a piece of cardboard. If you get a piece of cardboard, you have a ring idea, just cut it out of a piece of cardboard and put it around your finger, and just sort of get the feel of what it's like. I mean, you at home, if you're thinking about getting married and designing wedding rings, just get some scissors and some cardboard, and take like half an hour and just like cut shit out, and then wrap it around your finger and see what it looks like. And that's what I'm talking about. That's prototyping. That's getting a sense of what your own design can do. Now, I'm going to put some links to some products that I recommend, or companies that make these silicones and urethane resins that I use. So I'll put links to that in the show notes of the podcast. They're similar, made by other brands. So test everything first. Don't put yourself in a bind by trying a product you've never tried before for an important design. Always test the resins and the silicones or any other kind of chemicals that you're using to make prototypes before you actually do it. So you know how they perform, and you know if they burn out in kilns, all this stuff. You have to know this stuff. So be very familiar with the products that you're using to design your prototypes. Even if it's wood, you'll find that if you're carving something out of wood, you'll find certain wood has smaller grain that when you make a mold from it, it'll make a nice smoother surface. Or maybe you want the rough look. Maybe you want to mold like birch bark or something and work with that. So it can depend on your circumstance. But anyway, enjoy prototyping. Prototyping is fun. I mean, a lot of times it isn't when you're in it, but in the end it is fun because you end up with a product that is unique, is completely yours, and it's just an amazing design that you've worked all the bugs out of, and it comes together nicely in a beautiful product in the end. Anyway, that's it for me this week. I'm doing so much. I'm working on this turntable ingot. I'm doing a fundraiser for another project. Oh, there's so much on the agenda here in the Thousand Islands area of Ontario, Canada. Spring is here at last. This is going to be a fantastic year of design and prototyping. The Cannabis Goldsmith is produced by Tribe Communications, Inc. in the Thousand Islands area of Ontario, Canada. You can see what we do at tribe.ca. Send us an email, alexd@cannabisgoldsmith.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week on the Cannabis Goldsmith.